You've probably heard of Title IX. Now, it's the landmark civil rights legislation that, among other things, guarantees students the fundamental right to an education free from sexual violence and harassment. Unfortunately, 40 years after Congress passed it into law, little has changed. According to the National Institute of Justice, nearly 2 in 3 schools don't follow anti-violence law. Now, just this week, we learned that the feds are now investigating several schools for this failure, including Dartmouth, USC, and UC Berkeley. But the issue of sexual violence and gender discrimination in our society doesn't stop in college. Joining me to discuss, we have Tucker Reed, co-president of the Student Coalition Against Rape at USC in Los Angeles, California; Sarah Buck Dowd, she's an associate professor of criminal justice at Georgia College in Milledgeville, Georgia; and Diane Rosenfeld, lecturer of law and the director of the Gender Violence Program at Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Hi.
Thanks.
Well, this week has been a week of this issue that has been pervasive for decades. But it's been in the news especially hard this week. We have right here on the College Vertical, USC student, police says I wasn't raped because he didn't orgasm, which is just a part, Tucker, of what's happening. The U.S. is investigating handling of alleged sex assaults at USC, and you are part of the brave individuals who are trying to make change based on your personal experience, and we're grateful that you're here today. Can you give us a little bit of your background?
I'm a senior, a theater student at the University of Southern California, and I am the co-founder and co-president of the Student Coalition Against Rape.
We're going to work on getting you on the phone because there's something going on with your audio. This is an issue that's happening, Sarah, at colleges all over, including yours. You're in Georgia. What's happening right now on your college campus?
Well, our police officers and investigators are sort of stuck between reporting crimes and making our schools seem safe, and pressure from administrators to not report crimes. But there's an underlying conflict of interest because we're supposed to have protection of students, but also the appearance of safety, which does not work out in the end.
Right, and we have these situations, Diane, and the issue of safety is something that is a vague term because frequently what we're seeing is who's being protected, who's being taken care of, who is safe. Is it the perpetrator or is it the victim?
So, yeah, it's a question of safety, and it's important to recognize it as a public safety issue, but it happens in private. And getting schools to step up to the plate and actually do something about it, to recognize that this criminal behavior is happening to so many of its students is a task. But I think we're really well situated to start tackling it right now.
And you're tackling it in an issue that came to light a couple of years ago. We have here, right here on the Yale News, up close, Title IX 1 year later. And that's referring to a case that, a couple of cases that you have started working on. You've started helping out in figuring out how justice can be served. And the USC and the Dartmouth and the Occidental colleges, that's just lumping all on top of the same issue of that a federal law is being broken. Now, many people, when they see Title IX, they think athletics. But it's much more than that.
Right, and as you learned when you were my student at Harvard many years ago, Title IX requires that schools investigate and eliminate a hostile environment when they are on notice of it. And sexual harassment and sexual assault are indicative of a hostile environment.
But it's a hostile environment that is a gray area, and frequently it's not a gray area for those of us who understand, but it's perceived as a gray area. Sarah, when you're thinking about what you're seeing today, when you're looking at the news, has it changed any in the 16 years since you were violated? Sarah, you're actually muted. If you could go to your upper right-hand corner and unmute your button. Unmute your computer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. My question was, it's been 40 years since Title IX. We see the vast ignorance of this aspect of Title IX, even though it's a federal law. 16 years ago, you were in a similar situation to Tucker. You were in a similar situation to these individuals who are trying to get justice. Do you see any change in policy? Do you see any change in atmosphere regarding their struggles as when you were violated 16 years ago?
the few changes I see is that with specific campus police departments, the investigators do take it very seriously, but they go and put into a situation where you have to prove that something happened with physical evidence, and there's situation in which many times there aren't witnesses, there isn't usable evidence. Generally, it's a situation that happens in private. Our ideas about rape have not changed that much, in the sense that we view it as still physical coercion, and we still teach women to say no, no, no. And then that's not how the sexual experience works out. In my instance, I said stuff like, I don't really want to do this. I was educated to say no, 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 and that rape was something where you hold me down and all of those things. Well, coercion doesn't necessarily look like that. Society in general still sees rape as a stranger hiding in the bushes with a knife going to cut your Achilles tendon, and brutal abuse, which I'm not trying to say that acquaintance rape isn't, but a lot of victims still see rape that way, as well as investigators, as well as police, prosecutors, the general public.
Right.
So how do we get this message out there?
And I think one of the ways is by being here and sharing your stories. We're so grateful. Tucker, one of the differences between 16 years ago and now is the fact that the internet is such a pervasive part of society, which has negative sides to this, but also has positive sides. It means that when you create websites like this, Student Coalition Against Rape.wordpress.com, people see it. And you helped to start this with a few other individuals based on your experience, and I'm sure you relate to what Sarah was talking about.
Oh yes, indeed, and I would say that I agree to an extent that that sense that rape only is something committed by a stranger in the dark when you're walking home. It's pervasive, and it impacts a lot of women to this day who sit there going, no, I actually know this guy. He's in my science class, or he's my best friend's friend, or he's my boyfriend. That couldn't possibly have been rape, even though I said no so many times. And when you present your case, when you kind of accept the fact that that was indeed rape, that you were violated, and you present it to administrators, they often come from the standpoint, no, that couldn't possibly have been rape. He was your friend, he was your boyfriend, and also he's a student at this school, and all our students are good people.
And that's just wrong. That's just not necessarily how it is. It's an idealistic view. Diane, we have these stories. We have Tucker. We have who signed the petition. We have other women like the one you represent at Yale and around the country in different colleges. The feds have said they are going to do an investigation, so they are looking into this. But is that a lot of just talk, or is something actually going to come out of this? And if so, how long will this process take? I know that you've been invested in this individual story for over 2 years now.
So that's a great question, Nancy. I think that the federal government is more serious than it ever has been about making schools understand their obligation to prevent sexual assault and sexual violence on campus. And there's a new federal law called the Campus SAVE Act, the Sexual Violence Elimination Act, that was passed in March and signed into law by President Obama on March 7th. And it encodes the Dear Colleague letter that was a 19-page guidance from the Department of Education to schools, telling them exactly what to do on cases of sexual violence, and really articulating for the first time in a very clear way what schools have to do to address and prevent sexual violence on campus. And it's pretty reality based, and it goes to what Tucker was saying about schools thinking that it can't happen here because our students wouldn't do that. Schools wake up. Your students are doing it. You know, the Justice Department reports that 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 college-age women is sexually assaulted during her time at school. And it has to be going on at your school, just statistically. And I think it's time that schools are no longer able to hide their heads in the sand and pretend it doesn't happen. So I see some schools really stepping up and trying to do something proactive about it. The most important thing schools can do is educate and have really solid preventative education programs that start at orientation, but then are followed up on for the next several weeks of school, and really teach the students the rules of the road and the rules of living in a campus community, which means acting with sexual respect toward every other member of that community. And if you don't, you will suffer the consequences.
And that issue of sexual respect towards all communities expands beyond the college campus, into the workplace, into society at large. But Tucker, it also expands into personal relationships. I know that you were in a relationship. Your attacker was actually your boyfriend, and you stayed with him for 2 years. Can you tell me a little bit about this and how you finally decided to acknowledge the act, acknowledge the issue, and fight for justice?
Well, it was complicated by the fact that it occurred while he was intoxicated, and he claimed that he didn't remember anything that he did. And I think it just kind of ties back to, again, what we were speaking about, that kind of bias where you can't really impose that kind of extraordinary violent behavior on somebody that you perceive as being another student, another member of your community, someone who isn't that stereotype of stranger in the dark. I did reach out to multiple resources, trying to figure out how to reconcile the fact that I felt violated with the fact that it was a person that I knew. And that isn't something that is alien to a lot of acquaintance rape victims. Sarah, I would believe that you would agree with me that this is something that a lot of people kind of struggle with, this sense that to call someone a rapist is such a loaded accusation, and you feel kind of responsible for ruining their life if you think that maybe it was a mistake on their part, and that's not actually like what they are as a human being, you know? I don't want to ramble, though.
You're not rambling. What you're speaking is an extremely important facet of this conversation, and I know that Diane would agree, because that's exactly it. When you're in these situations, we have Title IX, we have the Clery Act, specifically in college to prevent issues like this. And this is the only place in one's entire life where there's supposed to be gender equality, there's supposed to be acts in place. But these are superseded, these federal laws are superseded by what Tucker suggested, which is, you don't want to ruin someone's life. You don't want to ruin the attacker's life. But what about the victim whose life is inherently ruined by the emotional outcome from not being respected, from her body being violated, and the entire process from the campus police to the juries not respecting this as an issue?
So if I can hop in here for a minute, this point that Tucker just made is so incredibly important, because it has a lot to do with what are the thought processes around acquaintance rape in college, and what are the perpetrators thinking, and how do they get messages that they think this is okay or acceptable, or that they can get away with it, none of which is okay. And for women who are victimized to then be told or to think that, oh, well, I'm going to ruin his life, and why should I ruin 2 lives now that he's already ruined mine, is something we really have to change. And one quite important fact is that most men who perpetrate sexual assault are serial offenders. And if they get away with it, they're just going to go on and sexually assault somebody else. So that's one thing to tell people, that it's not okay that he's ruined your life, so now you don't want to ruin his. He's going to go on and do it to someone else. And I've had many cases where the person comes forward after he's assaulted someone else, the person who was assaulted first.
And here's the thing, it's something that affects not just the college individuals, not just the victim or the perpetrator, whether or not they get off, whether or not they're admonished for what happens. You see how it affects society. And I'd love for you to speak to that, because we have here, again, federal campus sexual harassment policy draws free speech concerns. We have University of Montana rape reports botched. How does this correlate to Weiner, who says he texted 10 women, stays in New York City mayoral race? And then we also have the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Where are they now? These are situations where the perpetrator, their life continues, like nothing happens. Everyone's like, oh, you know, they just made a mistake, whatever. The individual who they affected, Monica Lewinsky was a 20-year-old intern. She didn't know. She's the one whose life is ruined, not the individual, not the man who acted with her. Is there a correlation between how we begin our adult life in college and how these laws are taken into effect to what happens at work when there's sexual harassment, and what happens when individuals are too ashamed or too afraid to bring forth these acts because they've seen in the public eye so often that the only person who gets in trouble is the victim. The only person who gets in any type of emotional problems or has any kind of career issues is the person who comes forward with these problems.
Right. So this is why our approach to stopping sexual violence has to be multifaceted and on many levels. And the reason that I concentrate so much of my academic work on college campuses is because we have this concentrated community in which we can really make change. And I have more faith in changing that than I do in the criminal justice system, to be perfectly honest. Mm-hmm. I think that social pressure will cause Anthony Weiner to fall out of the race really soon, I'm hoping. What's that right now? Okay, good. I'm glad he's just dropped out of the race.
Oh, excellent.
I'll be the first to report it.
Well, so this is great. HuffPost Live is right here. He's just dropped out of the race, so we're good to go on that front.
No, I actually just made that up.
Oh.
But
I was really excited, Diane. You threw me a curveball. I always trust everything that comes out of your mouth, and now I don't know. But it is important.
Well, I tell you when I'm kidding. But in a college campus, there's this feedback loop that maps onto what a college requirements are. So there's the education, and then services for survivors, and then prompt and equitable investigation and adjudication. And everything gets back to students, so they know if rape is not taken seriously on their campus, so they will be less likely to report it. And they also know from the environment what kind of sexual hostility is being tolerated. So the Yale case, for example, happened after these fraternity pledges surrounded freshman girls' dorms at night in October of 2010, chanting, "No means yes. Yes means," I don't want to say it on TV. And they were chanting it like they were in the military, and it was very hostile and intimidating and horrible. So that's the kind of environment that was going on, and then Yale didn't respond with any consequences to the people who were out there doing this. And then on another level, there were all these cases where Yale had failed to respond to cases of sexual assault. So that's what's underlying the Yale complaint and the other complaints that are being filed now.
And it's absolutely devastating, and I know that you don't want to mention, but I think it is important to see what we're dealing with when we're talking about sexual harassment. We're talking about issues of trust in our government to actually take care of our individuals. We have right here, no means yes, yes means anal, is what the frat was saying. They were actually banned from Yale, but it did take vigilante justice. Tucker, which is something that you're very passionate about. For individuals who...
I wouldn't say that.
No, not as a, no, I don't mean vigilante justice in the way that you're out. But what I do mean is you're very passionate about justice in general. That's what your attempt to do. That's why you're putting your story out here. You're sharing yourself, just like Sarah. If you had something, I'd love to hear from Sarah and and Tucker, if you had to give advice to an individual who's been in your situation, who's been in your shoes, what are the steps they should take in order to protect themselves and to try to obtain justice?
Well, I'll go first,
Sarah, I'm going to do that
I
one.
guess.
Yeah.
I deal with this every single semester. I have at least 3 or 4 female students who either contact me via email, phone, voicemail, texting me, come to my office, telling me about these situations that happen. And very often they don't even realize that it's rape. I had a student who works at the Women's Center, and it took her 4 to 5 days to be like, oh, that was rape, you know, because nobody wants to identify as a rape victim, because we look at victims negatively. So
Bill,
it also, oh, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to say, building off of that and what Diane was saying, it's important to keep track of the fact that we're not only culturally teaching rapists that acquaintance rape, for example, is not rape, but campuses, when they don't punish these students, are teaching the rapists that that's not rape and that they have a free path to commit acquaintance rape because it's a penalty-free crime. And that was the point I wanted to make.
I think that's a very important point. And again, it teaches it's a free crime. It's a free crime in college. It's a free crime to be a harasser in the workplace. It's a free crime to be a harasser on the bus. As Diane said, what you learn in college affects the rest of your life. And so I hope that the efforts that you all are doing really can make a difference in encouraging college students who are entering the class of 2014. Maybe this will be the year that they have the information they need to not make the choice to disrespect other individuals' bodies. Diane, last words?
I think that you're exactly right, that this is the year. And what Tucker is involved in this growing national movement among students who are connecting across universities to demand that the federal government protect them and demand that their schools live up to their policies and live up to the requirements of Title IX, which is the right to equal access to educational opportunities. This is unprecedented. So this is the time. This is the sea change. And we're going to see a lot of rising in the next few months.
Absolutely.
It's going to be very productive.
And we look forward to continuing to have people like you and you back on here to have this conversation. We have a comment here from Boring File Clerk. That chant was done twice by the same frat on 2 separate occasions. The university didn't care until someone recorded it and posted the video online. So thank you to whoever did that. And thank you all for speaking out, using your talents. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Sarah, I know that you're just coming off a road trip. Tucker, I know that you're in college. And Diane, I know that you are busy changing the world and being amazing. I miss you. I miss our classes together at Harvard. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and thank you for watching. Please keep watching, keep checking out what's coming up next in our green rooms, because the conversation always continues here at HuffPost Live.